Okay, I'm going to ask my speakers to turn on their video if they can. I know, DEEDRA, you're having trouble. We're trying to get you assistance. So hopefully we'll see you soon. Okay. And just want to ask everyone and to my speakers also, when you're not speaking, just stay on mute so that the person who is speaking is spotlighted in everybody else's screen. All right, so let's get started. Okay. So hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Danielle Emery. I'm the director of the People and Animals Living Safely program at Urban Resource Institute. You've heard from us a couple times today. I'm honored to be here today in conversation with three incredible individuals that I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with and knowing in various capacities over the last few years. Each of them experienced homelessness as a result of domestic violence. Each of them had pets through that experience, and each of them have carried through that experience a commitment to helping improve services and promote healing for others in similar circumstances. It's been a pleasure to work with the My Dog is My Home Conference Planning Committee to facilitate 3 sessions related to domestic violence and co-sheltering. There was one in the last breakout session, and there will be another one tomorrow. And in these 3 sessions, it was important to me to focus on survivor, for one of these sessions to include and focus on survivor voices, not only to center lived experience, but to represent the many individuals impacted by DV and homelessness who dedicate their skills, passions, and really much of their lives to making a tremendous difference for others. So this session will be structured a little bit differently from other breakout sessions. Each speaker will give a brief introduction, and then I'll engage with them for a brief period, and then we will go into a group conversation. If you have questions or comments for the speakers, please put those in the chat, and we will keep an eye on that throughout the session. And I hope this conversation illustrates the importance of co-sheltering for all those experiencing homelessness, not only for survivors of domestic violence and the impacts that these programs can have on a person, a family, and the wider world. And there has been quite a lot of kind of heavy storytelling today. So I just want to remind everyone in attendance that these speakers will be sharing details of their lived experience. Some of those things may be difficult to share, some things may be difficult to hear. So please just take care of yourself as needed. And I'm thankful to each speaker for your generosity and vulnerability and being here and sharing with us. Okay, so first up, we're going to meet our first speaker. First, we're going to meet Hope Victoria. Hope Victoria is an author, artist, motivational speaker, and entrepreneur residing in Brooklyn, New York. Same, not the entrepreneur, but I reside in Brooklyn, New York. Having experienced homelessness with her children and her dog Coco due to domestic violence, she has dedicated her life to sharing her story, advocating for necessary development in the sheltering system, and helping others to navigate hardship healthily. As the founder and CEO of One Victory Designs Publishing Speaking, Hope Victoria utilizes trauma-informed storytelling as well as an inspirational clothing line and motivational speaking to encourage everyone to heal out loud, tap into true potential, and trust everything is for purpose. So, Hope, please take it away.
Hello. Thank you so much for that introduction, Danielle. It is amazing to see you again. It's been a while, even though it's virtually, it's still hi. And hello, everyone else who's viewing. Hi.
Hold on just 1 second, Hope.
Oh, okay.
Shoshana, can you mute?
Yes, please, so that we can give the vaccines here and the deworming. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Can you mute yourself, please, Jose?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. Where's that one?
Okay, should be good now, Hope.
I love it. I love that. You know what? I think every time I speak, even though I've done this often, I get a little nervous. And there's always like something that happens that's a little kind of off the cuff that just, you know, makes you like, so thank you for that. Just a little bit about my story, though. I went to it and really like just violence. Ultimately, it led to myself and my children being displaced from our home. At the time, we were in Texas. We weren't even here. We were quite a ways away, but all roads led to me coming here by myself initially. It was just a notion. I felt it was where I needed to be. I really had nowhere else to go. I knew I had to get far away from there. And so I was separated from my children and Coco for a few months, and just living with my sister who's lived in New York for some time. So she had friends who would allow me to like crash on their couch or floor or whatever was happening. And I was homeschooling my children long distance, everything. But eventually it came to a point where we had to reunite. You know, my children, they were not necessarily having the best time, you know, with just everything being upended the way it was. I wasn't able to settle, you know, into a new apartment as of yet. And so everything was still, you know, busy. They needed her. And then Coco was just, she needed me too. She thought she was the mom in my absence. And so Coco was really just doing the most. But no, she got really aggressive and things like that. And the kids didn't know how to handle that. And so it was affecting her also. I ended up bringing them to New York with me, and we went through, you know, to get into the sheltering system. At the time, the most interesting thing I think is that I didn't even identify as a domestic violence survivor, because my ideal of what domestic violence dream that I felt like that wasn't me, you know, maybe, you know, just did that, but it was just once or twice. It was just a little bit, you know, it didn't, you know, and one time I found myself saying like, oh, you know, he just choked me a little bit. And somebody says, how do you choke somebody a little bit? Like either they did or they didn't. And so I was starting to realize these things, like there was abuse. And when I went into the sheltering system, they kept classifying me as DV and saying, you know, they say like 2 and 1, 2 children, 1 adult. And I was just like, why are they classifying me as that? I mean, it was so weird, but eventually it really honestly wasn't until I went to a meeting on a Friday afternoon and I heard other people sharing their stories that it hit me like all of a sudden that, wow, like, yeah, I am a survivor, you know, and it is applicable. And I did go through this domestic, you know, I was just in denial and I had to accept it in that moment, but it was through URI that I was able to get the help that I needed to process through the moment. My children were able to get what they needed. Coco was able to get what she needed. And we were all excited than ever. So on the other side of leaving the shelter and getting an apartment, I was able to apply that experience to even just this part of my life, to share and let people know, like, even when you feel like you've lost everything, that doesn't mean it's the end. It just is an opportunity to start over and to start over fresh and stronger than you ever did, because you know more. And when you know better, you can do better and prepare the next chapter to where it looks nothing like before. And so that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Hope. And definitely I can have pictures of Coco being extra when I have met her as well. So I know what that looks like. And I know art has been an important part of your life. So I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about how, you know, both before you were in shelter, during your time in shelter, and then after, how art has really, you know, impacted your healing and your ability to communicate with others about your experience and about their experiences.
Yes, thank you for even asking that. Because it had been my entire life. Prior to abuse and anything, there was just life that was happening as a child that I didn't know how to understand, you know, how to deal with. And so I used art as a way to communicate what my words didn't necessarily, you know, they couldn't formulate at the time because I didn't even know how to do that. So whether it was dancing, whether it was acting, singing, drawing, whatever I could do to express myself and get these feelings outside of myself has always helped in everything, which I know, you know, but through One Victory designs, publishing, and speaking, I'm able to not only tap into that for myself, but help others to learn how to tap into it for themselves also. So it's definitely prevalent in my life.
Is there a particular, like, I know you do spoken word and you do design, but has there been a particular moment of sharing or of you expressing art that has really like that you have felt that's connected with people, or you've felt like has enabled someone to find their own voice?
Yes, I feel a lot of times when I would create prior to this season in my life, I would create for myself, like for my own therapy, right? So I wasn't necessarily thinking about how others would be impacted, but I would maybe go somewhere and perform a song or a spoken word piece, and someone would come up to me after, you know, sometimes with just like tears in their eyes, saying that they understood, really like resonated with them, that it was exactly what they needed to hear in that moment. And those things, and it went from, it's like almost like as if you're in a room and you're performing with your eyes closed because it's just for you, you know, to where I had to open my eyes and realize like there are other beings here, there are other people, and we can heal together. And so that in this chapter, I think is how, you know, it's changed, is that when people have come up to me and said things, I've actually opened my eyes and realized like, this is something that I don't have to hoard just for my own therapeutic process, but I can, and I am helping other people with it, and just kind of lean into that.
Well, thank you. We're going to talk much more after the other intros. So I'm going to move on to CELINA actually next, because we're having some technical difficulties with DEEDRA's camera, so we're working on that. But CELINA JYOTI is the founder of the Empathy Initiative, which she'll tell us more about. I'm not going to describe it. And she's also the Arizona Chapter Regional Coordinator for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, a military, civilian, domestic violence, and sexual assault advocate, and a member of the Arizona Military Civilian Resources Committee with the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, who I know we have representation from in this session. So welcome, CELINA. So grateful to have you here with us, and invite you to share more about yourself, your experience, and if you have time now, the Empathy Initiative, but we can also talk about that down the line.
Okay, yes. Hi, my name is CELINA. Myself, my children, and our pets all suffered various types of abuse from my ex-husband. Every day was filled with psychological manipulation and just the overwhelming grip of control in general. Typically, we would hear the phrases, if you can't prove it, it didn't happen. So often the type of abuses that were utilized were like strangulation, suffocations, things that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, or very discreet, insidious abuse. We always would hear, you have no way out, and he would make certain that he would support that with other barriers, whether it's isolation or making allyship with the local PD, because he had avenues through various sectors. That said, everything that went on, it was a state of escalation always. Every single failed escape heightened the risk factors. And this always put us in a situation where it was any thought of escaping was always met with doubt. That said, it wasn't just, I felt, going into this, I felt like my perception of DV was different. After experiencing it myself, I realized it wasn't just weaknesses, but also your strengths used against you to gain the control that the abuser wants. And in that space, everything I loved was weaponized. My children and our pets were no exception. Eventually, it was in that space of trying to get all of our I would delay a lot of our escapes, trying to get our periodically, we would have, intermittently, we would have dogs. I would have to sneak them out because at the time I wasn't aware that they would actually be able to be part of our escape. And then it got to the point where standing in front of all of the physical abuse for everyone, I came, or I guess you could say I was confronted with the realization that it was not realistic when I was a couple seconds too late from saving our 18-month German Shepherd who he murdered. In that space, it was definitely put me in that paralyzing fear of even knowing if it was safe for the rest of us to escape. And in that state of mourning as well, it left me in a deep-rooted guilt that I didn't do what I was supposed to do. That was my baby. So it was definitely a huge detour, and what my idea of a perfect escape was. I realized there was no such thing. It was just trying to keep my mission as a safe escape for all of us. Things escalated at that time. My ex-husband, he went on his first and only deployment, and when he returned, he was kicked off for unbecoming behavior. That behavior then escalated into him nearly intentionally almost murdering our son on a military base in front of everyone. No one would help me. They looked like they were in just as much fear and terror as I was. I was able to save our son. Unfortunately, since he had our phones, I was not able to get help, and others did not provide me help. I then had to take that upon myself to realize this perfect escape that I wanted, again, was something that I had to really lean into my own self. After the murder of my dog, I did seek, I snuck off to counseling without his knowledge. And I do feel like those 6 months of critical self awareness and wellness allowed me to move in a level of trust that I could trust that I was making all of the right decisions in a space of unwavering knowledge outside of my, I guess you would say, my compromised emotions. So in this space, we're able to, I was able to feel like I get this wonderful escape in order. Unfortunately, in that space of him going to sniper school within a day or two of his near attempted murder of our son, he went AWOL, he came back, and he pretty much threatened us and just did a lot of things that he felt like was going to keep us mentally broken enough that we wouldn't be able to escape. I was able to seek help from the domestic violence victims advocates through the Air Force, even though he was Army at the time. And I was able to lean on them and receive a safe escape. However, once my children and I escaped from Florida, where we resided, to Arizona, everything still continued as far as the abuse that he was able to obtain. Outside of the physical abuse, we still underwent stalking and financial abuse. And we were forced to reside in a shelter or various shelters for about a year's time. In that space, I had to really find intentional trauma recovery for my children. All three of them processed the trauma differently, and I had to strategize in a way that I had to create a specific and careful, thought out, specialized recovery for them. And I was able to create, I guess you say informally, I was able to create the steps of what now I'm looking to mirror in an empathy initiative as far as something specific to domestic violence with animal abuse exposure. That said, it was very important for me to not only reconnect with the empathy that I felt was lost when it was surrendered to fear and survival, keeping them in a self-serving, or I guess you say a self-preserving mode, but also to not repeat that behavior, because I had a daughter, especially the one that she has high functioning autism. She's already processing emotions a little different than, I guess you say, a typical person. So unfortunately, her dad weaponized that in a way that she was a little bit more malleable to alter her moral compass. So it was very critical for me to look for specialized care specifically with both the links of animal violence and domestic violence. And there was not any on a national or a local level when I sought help. So I was able to get a lot of help from the Arizona Humane Society. I was able to supplement that with trauma therapy from Child Help, and I was able to help them graduate from play therapy. And then the Arizona Animal Welfare League was kind enough to allow us to come each week and just sit next to the cages and how the children reconnect with them. And I would set up assignments for them to, and I would like assign them each an animal or a dog that week. And we would have celebrations when they would be adopted and readjusting. It went from, oh, well, at least they have some food and a roof over their head, to them, oh, it must really suck to be able to be stuck in this little space and not be able to have a family to be with each day, and really see the shift in just their altered perception of what was okay and what they were able to pick up emotionally, just exercising that emotional intelligence that once wasn't present or was very desensitized in that space of leaving domestic violence.
CELINA, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It sounds horrifying, and I'm sorry that you and all of your family experienced that, and glad that you were able to get to safety. And I'm also very, very sorry about your dog. And I know that is painful to talk about and remember, but you were doing the best that you could at that time. So, I did want to ask with the empathy initiative, I know you described a little bit about kind of the genesis of why you were looking to create something to kind of fill that gap in services that you didn't think was available for yourself and for your children, and how do you see it taking shape as a program to help others who may be experiencing in a similar type of situation?
Yes, with the experience of my children, and even seeing, like I always say, recovery doesn't have a time frame. It's like it turns into a lifestyle, and that's one that's I guess you say maintained by healing in the healing process. And so that was something that I felt like the initiative, or I guess you say that's what I was seeking. I just feel like there's a lot of different parts of the empathy initiative. I would just say the empathy initiative itself is that bridge. There's a lot of services that's either servicing humans or animals, but it wasn't a lot in the space of therapeutic guidance for both. Because even at the point in time that we were able to escape, we had another dog that unfortunately my ex-husband called the replacement, but I had to really look to rehome her even before our last escape. And I remember just thinking once I was in a process of seeing, okay, each child, they need this approach or that approach, started to think, oh, well, wow, if I would have had my dog, she would have been going through trauma as well. And just even thinking about even though humans were able to verbalize our triggers sometimes, which a lot of times in children, sometimes they're not able to identify it as such. It displays in various ways. And I feel like I want to really operate in that space where we're able to identify in a different type of communication what is needed for that healing process to happen. And right now we're in that space of wanting to look for what are the core values of what we need to exercise that emotional intelligence to be able to operate out of that safe area of healing and healthy for children in particular, where we can help potentially reroute and heal pathways that were either disrupted or have not yet been able to have a chance to be exercised and grow. So in that space, I guess you say even, which was kind of surprising, which I realized the ACES program, which definitely a couple individuals are actually said that they're looking into it more, but the ACES program did not mention animal abuse as an adverse childhood effect, which was primarily, I feel like, the most severe trauma that my children had to go through, seeing that abuse by proxy by the dog. Like, it was definitely one of the greatest concerns that I had, especially with the link to more severe crimes. And so being able to operate in that space where we are able to really approach that head on and restructure the lifestyle and approach of how that recovery looks, and just even work on that curriculum of how it'll at least create a baseline of, okay, this is where we can start planting a seed to allow this person to grow into a healthy, empathetic individual.
Right. Thank you so much for your work, and I continue to be amazed by, not to overuse the word initiative, but the initiative that you took in order to get the services for yourself and your children to get on that path to recovery, and that you're continuing to do that is just, it's amazing. So,
thank you, appreciate it.
And our third individual who I'm going to introduce is DEEDRA CHEETHAM. Hi, DEEDRA. Is a domestic violence survivor who found safety for herself and her children through URI's PALS program. She was able to secure permanent housing for her family, including her son's turtle, and turned her passion into a career and became a grassroots political organizer. DEEDRA was instrumental in advocating for and helping move along 2 New York City council bills concerning the pets of people experiencing homelessness. So specifically want to hear some more from DEEDRA on her experience both with domestic violence and then also your experience within the city council person's office and in working on those bills. So take it away, DEEDRA.
Hi guys, hi ladies.
No, it's a bit of a reunion, so hello.
Yeah, so I came into the domestic violence shelter system after fleeing from a 15-year abusive relationship with the father of my children. And at that moment, the abuse happened. I had just undergone spinal decompression surgery, so I was unable to walk. My son was 3 years old. His stroller would, and hope you saw, his stroller became my walker. So instead of using stroller, I pushed him around on my walker. I came into the shelter system barely walking. I had to learn how to walk again. And I vowed that I rolled in the door and I will walk out the door. And I literally walked out the door without my walker. I learned a ton from being around these women. You gain strength, you gain wisdom. And I took a lot of those skills that in those moments I felt like didn't even apply to me, or that I didn't need, or conversations with people that didn't mean anything to me in those moments, and they were trying to uplift me. And I took that and all that energy from them, and I started to advocate. Leaving the shelter is a whole different world. They say stepping into and out of DV is a different world, and you find yourself. But when you're on your own and you're forced to not have that support from your abuser, and you're not isolated anymore, it is a complete shock to your system. I literally had to relearn myself. I had to find out who I was again. I had to find out who my kids were, what they liked. We lose so much of that, and never really understand that. At least for me and myself now, I'm understanding that for me, some of that domestic violence was like a codependency, and I had to break that. Like, we had a great group there, and we learned, not about just drugs and alcoholism and things like that, but we learned about codependencies and what roles they play in our lives. And again, all of those skills are skills that I took with me. After I got my apartment, I moved in my apartment. I shortly started working for City Council Member Steve Levin at District 33. And I was his Director of Constituent Services. With that, I dealt with homeless people, our population, right? Like, I dealt with victims of domestic violence. I dealt with advocating for HRA services to ensure that families and residents of the city of New York had all their benefits that they were entitled to. Again, all the things that I saw inside there that people were fighting for and just things that we needed just to survive were, I put it in my head to ensure that I could give back, right? And like, you don't want to be a victim. We talk about that so much, and not being victimized. And the way I chose to not be victimized by our system anymore was to give back and help and uplift people. So I continued a partnership with you guys, URI, and the PALS program. And I started to get a lot of calls about people and their pets and just like the situations. Like, I don't want, again, we hear this all the time, right? I don't want to go into shelter because of my pet. Well, you called the right person, because guess what? I was that person. I know firsthand what that is like and what the struggle is, especially when you have small babies and children. So I started advocating, and I'm like, well, how come only in the DV spectrum people can come into shelter, and only through URI, specifically in the city of New York, can people come into the shelter system with their pets? And why is there such a boundary put up to say who gets housed and who doesn't, and who's safe and who doesn't? So I, with my legislative director and the council member, this had been a conversation that they had been having, but I'm like, okay, let's push the envelope. I'm all about pushing the envelope on things. And we did. It took a while. We went through COVID and we were like, oh no, this is not gonna happen. Oh my God. And I was like, no, let's like, once we got hearings back, and I'm like, okay, but what about that bill? Like, I was destined to ensure that before the council member left office, that bill would get passed, and that at least I could be inspirational and bring some sort of victory and some sort of relief to families, right? I did the Hope Count for 3 years. And in the Hope Count, we literally go all around the city and we count. We are literally counting people on the streets. And I ran into so many people. I'm trying not to cry here, guys. You guys know I'm a big softie. With pets in the subway system and just like on the street, and I could not fathom it. And I'm like, we're counting them, but we're not housing them. We're counting them, but we're not helping them. A lot of victims of domestic violence, we have great organizations that do so much. URI, I can't like uplift you guys enough, right? And in this space and in the city, but we have so many, but it just feels like we're not reaching the masses that I know we could. And just seeing that again fueled me, right? Like fueled me. So I just recently, my council members left office in January. So my next part of what I'm trying to do right now, and I'm in the process of doing, is getting a meeting with Mayor Eric Adams, because yes, the bill did get passed. The bill got passed. So it is a law right now, but people still don't know it, right? Like, we have a whole new administration, and now the conversation and the push to the envelope needs to be, how do we ensure that this is happening? We need oversight for this bill. We need to make sure that it is happening. We need to make sure that nobody's getting turned away. So that is where I'm at and what I'm doing. And yeah, so.
Thank you, DEEDRA. I remember that, just hearing your voice on the day the bills were passed, and just how, and sharing in that joy and excitement was just so memorable and special and meaningful for us too. And you are such a fierce advocate, and I hope, I know you will not stop until you get meetings and get attention paid to those bills, so that hopefully they are implemented, and that services do increase for people experiencing homelessness in New York City with their pets. So I did want to ask a question to all of you. I think DEEDRA sort of brought it up, but I do, being at a co-sheltering conference and in the domestic violence world, I think, so much of the focus is a lot of times on like leaving a domestic violence situation or getting out of an abusive relationship, and then you enter shelter. And that's the start. Like, that is really, there is so much that happens. And so I'm just wanting to hear more from you about, like you were talking about, DEEDRA, about that transition out of shelter, and what helped you, and how your advocacy or your art or like developing programs, how these different things that you've all taken on have kind of helped you adapt back, adapt into the world as a new, same but new person, I guess.
Yeah. Again, like, we learn things, and when we walk into this space, our guards are up. We come from trauma. We're walking in with trauma. We are walking in hopeless. We are walking in lost. We don't trust anyone, no matter how much you're trying to help us. We are very resentful. We are just, and it takes time to break those walls down. And thankfully, we are fortunate enough, us women here are fortunate enough to have staff that are really compassionate and understand, and some who have also experienced these things, so know, right, like what breaking generational curses are, and for some of us this is what this is. So stepping out into the world and just advocating, these are tools that you guys have handed us, and sometimes we don't necessarily know when we're going to be able to utilize them, but as soon as we step away from you guys, that it kicks in, you know. Just speaking up for ourselves, learning to say no was the biggest and the hardest thing that I had to learn to do. And I only learned it inside of URI because I was the yes person. Yes, because of everything I went through, and learning to say no and know that I am worth it. I am human. I have a right to say no. I have a right to be safe. And then just instilling that. And I think as women, men, humans, right? We want to break generational curses. And I think all of us on this page right now has officially, broken those curses and is able to do that. So, and our children are going to be fierce advocates. They're in the works. Hope I know your babies were already doing it.
Yes, I just wanted to chime in there. Oh my goodness. Like, and first off, say DEEDRA, like I was just so overwhelmed with emotion because like I'm so proud of you. Everything that we talked about while we were there. Like, wow, y'all don't even know. Like I saw her when she came in the door. And this is beautiful to see right here today. It's amazing. But when you make those connections and you realize how many people from so many different parts of life have experienced what you experienced, like it's hard to go on the other side and not feel like you want to help others who might not even know about a URI to lift the weight the world had each other. Like we had each other, and they may not. And so it's like something that's fire that gets lit. And I gotta stop talking. I'm too emotional, but just seeing your face took me. Oh man, whew. I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of you too. We are survivors, love. We did it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit also emotional just knowing you both, and I'm just so grateful for you and for you sharing your stories and your voices and for being here and for your vulnerability and just the impact that you sharing your stories has on other people. I think at conferences and presentations, we hear statistics, this number of people are impacted by this, but to hear, the actual voices of people who've experienced this thing is so impactful. And hopefully, for those who didn't already know the importance of supportive, trauma-informed domestic violence shelter and programs that accommodate pets, your messages are so powerful, and getting them to know that that is necessary and so important in helping people to heal and recover. So thank you. I'm going to transition sort of sharply because I think we might need to, but I want to talk about animals just because I want to hear, just the role, I don't know, just the role that animals have played in you and your children's and your family and your lives over the course of your lives after the domestic violence, but before when you were children. I want to hear about what animals have meant to you. So someone take it away.
Oh, wow, good. Well, I'll say, and even that's one reason why I mentioned as far as just like even your strengths been weaponized against you in domestic violence, because this relationship that I've always had with animals, it was like everyone thought like for sure I was going to be a vet, including myself. My nickname growing up since I can remember was Dr. Dolittle, just because that connection that I had. And me being, I was a subjected mute until I was 10. So honestly, majority of my friends are pets. It was just this very deep-rooted connection that I felt like I had that step beyond the oral verbal communication that us as humans sometimes rely on. And so I always really valued that space and cherished it. And it was always in my head, felt like that was something that was always going to be I guess you say given when it was going to be, when I had my children, that this was going to be passed down to them. And just even that relationship, even just culturally too, as far as just some of the things connecting with back in my teenage years. My mom is part Native, and just been in embracing that space, and I feel like that was something that was kind of taken from me inside of that I want to pass down to my children. Although I'm able to exercise that now, it wasn't on the foundation that I thought it was going to be. And I was happy to see that even like while in shelter, although we were not able to escape with our pets, we were lucky enough to have Gabriel's Angels visit weekly, and just seeing my children to start to really heal through some of the things that they were exposed to and that they've seen, and able to have that connection where they don't have to worry about verbalizing what they're feeling, and have something really feel through it with them. And so just even having that dog therapy each week was something that was very critical. And even those things allowed us to even get to the space. Like, it was 3 years before we were able to, have the dog that we rehomed now. Or it's kind of like he rehomed us, because it's a big story, but he definitely picked us. But it definitely just even him being an aided resource in the house, as far as just he's a wonderful conductor of just having people feel through it. Like, it's no one's trying to hide or feel like it's inappropriate for them to cry or anything like that. He just sits there and he lets you just cry it out, and actually get in that space of actually allowing you to exercise your emotions in a healthy release. So I feel like it's very important, and it's always been a part of my life.
I feel like that's so key too, of even if if you're not operating a co-sheltering program, but anytime you're working in human services, like having connections to therapy animal groups and just giving people an opportunity to interact and have that time with animals is such a powerful tool in healing. So what's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Django. He came with the name, and I'd be like, why? He lives up to the title.
Hope for DEEDRA. Oh, there he is.
Oh, he's big.
Boy.
He would probably eat Coco. No, Coco's tiny. But Coco really helped us a lot, because, and it might sound a little bad, but she was really sick when we first adopted her, and through our hardship, she almost died. Actually, we were really just focusing our attention on nursing her back to health, which helped us in a way to be distracted from everything that was going on with us. And then it's like, in a sense, she paid it forward, because as soon as she was well, she was like, okay, now I'm going to help nurse you back to health, And so there's this give and take with her. I mean, she's my baby. Anybody who has kids, like, they go through these phases and show these personality traits, and you're just so like into it. I promise she can talk now. I don't know. She said hi to me twice, I think. I don't. It definitely keeps a smile on my face, even on the hardest days now, because just because we're out of the shelter doesn't mean life is so, it's always easy. Life is life for everybody, right? And I will come home, and even if my kids, who are teenagers, and sometimes, they're teenagers, they don't care that I'm home. They're like, hey, Coco's like, hey, it's that love, that unconditional love that never goes away. And that's just something that I feel like you don't experience that with anybody else, really. Even a baby is gonna like thank you, but a pet is just like, it's love, and it's never ending. You could leave out for 5 minutes, you come back, it's like it's been 5 years. They will just shower you with that, and that helps. It helps in every circumstance.
DEEDRA,
So, surprise, I don't have a cat and I don't have a dog. I have a turtle. and her name is Danny Lee. And Danny Lee was gifted to us by my brother, who was supposed to go to the pet store and get a fish or a bird, and he came back with a turtle. And I was like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't know anything. But again, it's a birth, and it's a grow to love. And Danny Lee is super amazing. And Danny Lee, the unique thing about animals is that they can feel our emotions, and they know when we're okay, and they know when we're not. And like, they have this immediate instinct to like protect and just like set off and just be like, okay, no. Danny Lee, when I was going through the abuse in the house and we would argue and the fights would happen, all you would hear is like her scratching on the tank and paddling fast and like just like being really like unsettled. And and then they was like, okay, no arguing, calmness. And I didn't understand it. Like, I didn't even understand that was a thing until like talking with Anne, and she's like, oh no. And like sitting with the pet psychologist, like, really, like, pets have like mental health for the pets. Hello. It's a thing, and URI does it. And we were just talking, and I'm like, how they were like, how's the turtle? And I'm like, she's very calm now. And but if somebody knocked at the door, she would like paddle, paddle, paddle. My turtle wasn't supposed to be my pet, but we found each other, and I vowed to protect her because she protected me, and she calmed me. And even now, like, she's a little quiet over there now. She's probably sleeping, but you will hear her like when we're getting up in the morning. She's paddling on the tank, like, she takes baths. She's my baby. She takes baths in the bathtub, and it's just those moments. And again, it's deeper than just like us raising pets, right? It's us teaching our children and reinstilling in our children care and compassion for life, right? And just loving life and appreciating our pets and our children, because you can't tell me that's not my child, and just appreciating that. So I, emotionally, she supports me, mentally, physically, like, she walks through the house after her bath and just, I mean, it's an amazing, it's amazing. I don't even want to say partnership. It's just a bond, and there's nothing that I would not do to protect my baby, right? And getting out and seeking safety. That was one of the things that I did.
I say,
you should
DEEDRA,
get
your
Charlotte.
Story and Danny Lee are, one of the examples that we cite often of, this isn't only a cat and dog connection, or not only cats and dogs, needing safety. And we have rabbits and turtles and guinea pigs and even fish that people have that emotional connection to. And so it's all types of pets, really. So yeah, I love that Danny Lee lives in a giant tank.
She is in a huge tank. Yeah. She just flipped her dock over though. Okay. So
yes.
One space.
Yeah. So a question I did want to ask you each, in your advocacy or growing programs or representing yourself through art, if there was your kind of consideration of like identifying as a survivor of domestic violence, like if you, for example, in your advocacy, DEEDRA, like, did you sort of immediately kind of share with other people around the bills, like the reason that you were so interested is because you had experienced it? So similar to like Hope with your public speaking, like what has been your journey with kind of, I don't want to say owning, but a little bit like owning that and being comfortable with identifying yourself as a person who's a survivor of DV. Same, Selena, I know your work is very connected to DV, but I don't know. I'm interested to hear about, just the level and your process of deciding to share that with people.
I will say, sorry, go.
Oh, I was gonna say, well, for me personally, I think that it was almost like people would always say, you're so strong, or they would view me in this certain perspective as if because they were going through certain things, they weren't as strong, or maybe they didn't, like, I wish I could be like you, or these things. And then I would have to share with them like, well, listen, like you see me as a strong person and maybe you think that I haven't experienced this, that, and the other, but it's life that has caused me to become this way. And so then I can share, I've experienced abuse. I've experienced physical violence and sexual abuse and homelessness and all these things. And when I began to share that, it's more so, I wasn't thinking of how they viewed me differently. Maybe they just viewed me as human. That's a dangerous place to be in, you know, but with themselves, I wanted them to view themselves as the same, like we are one and the same. You are strong, you're still here, we're having this conversation, and yes, you're going through it now, and I was there at one point, and in time you will get to this point too, and somebody's going to look at you and not see the scars that you're carrying around. They're not going to see your past, you know. And so for me, it was empowering and just something that I wasn't afraid to share. It didn't change anything. It just seemed to relate because I have gone through a lot of things. And so when somebody feels like they're in this unique situation and it's only them, I'm able to say, no, well, you know, I've experienced that, you know, and they're like, wait, I'm not alone. And now we can converse, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely piggyback on that. I will definitely say that for me, it is about healing. And, you know, in terms of just like passing legislation, I'm a firm believer that directly impacted people should be at the table making decisions and have a voice and just, you know, tell your story, share your story, right? Like that is your truth. And that is also a part of healing. That is how we heal. I wasn't really forthcoming with a lot of my friends because in their eyes, you know, he was this great guy, you know, and no way, not him. So, but eventually again, like just through talking and just learning and accepting my truth that this happened and being okay with it, it made it easier to talk about. Now I'm like, yeah, this is me. This is who I am. And I don't see who I was because each day is a battle and each day we deal with certain things and triggers and, you know, things show up in different ways, but definitely allowing directly impacted folks, you know, to have a voice and you know, and be able to make decisions and be able to say, this is what I want, you know, the unspoken, right? Like we always say, like homeless people and domestic violence victims are like unspoken. And I think speaking up in any space that you feel safe and comfortable with is part of our healing process. So that's what drives me.
Yes, and I definitely agree with both Hope and DEEDRA. I feel like when I first, I felt like it was kind of I went in different phases of it. Honestly, it was like, I feel like until I was put into shelter, I didn't really identify myself initially as domestic violence until, because I like put it like this, my intake form, if I had to fill it out now, would be totally different from before. I remember even at one point in time, I had an advocate when I was the domestic violence advocate, when I'm sending my safe escape, I didn't put down that he was stalking, because in my head, he was just a carrying husband. And so it wasn't until I was in the office and she said, I see you didn't check stalking. And this is probably like 30 phone calls in already that I've answered or text messages. And she's like, no, he's a stalker, honey. Like, and so it's just like, this is stalking. Like for me to learn and readjust what my idea of what I thought domestic violence was. And even that was one reason why I'm in that space of hoping to bring that awareness of, you hear people like, oh, why don't you just get out? Why don't you just get out? And then at the same time, it's like DV is such a slow boil, and especially in a way that it's like, when you are already in that space of fear, it's already like you're already submerged, and it's very scarce of like how you need to get out or want to get out, ideally when it's safe. And then at the same time, I feel like even the term domestic violence as a whole in society is so desensitized in the umbrella term that it is, that it does look different, and it looks different for everyone. And so until I brought myself to a certain level of awareness, I almost want to stay away from the stigma that I feel like it carries.
Hold on a sec.
Lee wants a cup of
Oh, no. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
I
But
think
no, in
she's
doing
muted.
so,
There you go.
but in doing so, that did lead me down the road as far as like I said, it's a slow boil in. Sometimes it's that slow boil out, and I gather inspiration from other people to be that next step that completes that journey. And I want to be that for other people and do that on a grander scale. I did have the opportunity and was very fortunate enough to have a lot of support from Senator McCain's office, who in addition to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand's office, and she invited me on to help participate in the beginning stages of what's now the Military Family Protections Act back in 2018. And we were able to at least address some of the hurdles that my children and I face. Even though it wasn't there for us, it was able to be changed for it's now military wide. And I was able to also directly change the way that procedures are handled for my ex-husband's unit, which was a big feat at the especially considering it was kind of like it was in that world where for lack of better words, it was the Good Boys Club because it was Special Forces unit. It was kind of like, we don't need to adjust, you do. And so to even see such a major change happen, and I was like, it was kind of like, okay, this could potentially save so many lives. And just being in that space is what kind of allowed me to start doing things on the civilian side, to realize how much of just even domestic violence became a community to me, and all of our voices create a yell together, and it helps really instill and enact that meaningful change that needs to happen.
Amazing. It's incredible to hear just from each of you and the levels of change and the personal impact that you've had on individuals, cities, governments, the military. Like it's really, really incredible. And you are all amazing, amazing women. I did want to, if there are questions that people or specific things in the chat, if anyone had things that they wanted to add to the conversation, I'm happy to include some of that. But I did want to ask a question too, just because a lot of us are service providers within animal welfare, DV shelter, human services. If, thinking back on your experience or people that you have spoken with since you've been out of shelter, what were additional resources or assistance or connections that could have helped you more, or helped you to recover faster, or to seek shelter or get into shelter? What were some of the gaps in services? I know, Selena, you spoke to this a bit, but what were some of those gaps that you experienced that we can all work to address?
I know for myself, there was, well, I guess you say, luckily for myself, I had the opportunity, but there's still like that lingering gap. And I believe that DEEDRA spoke on it earlier as well, as far as the housing. That was, I would say, everything kind of stemmed from that. Even just the fact that even knowing that my children, that consistency was critical to their mental wellness and everything else, even as far as myself being able to take the steps in the future. And so I felt like us being in that, and we're in various shelters, because I guess you say, had a time frame on each, and we had to have certain things completed within that time frame. And the biggest thing outside of like being able to, luckily I was able to be part of a collaboration effort, but it was only like 25 vouchers for this women's study for the entire state. So it's like, well, it's obviously it's with the influx of how many applications were put into it. I felt like it showed the need for that space, and then also I would say the biggest thing for myself that I felt like there were not enough services for the children. Although I understand the concept and the analogy of it, as far as because you can't pour from an empty cup, or I would say, like I would ask about kids programs and everything. We would have our groups, but it was kind of like the kids groups wasn't an actual like structured group. It was just more like, okay, go to the playground. And I was like, this is a great opportunity for intervention in a rehabilitative type of way. And it was like, oh, but I would always get told, well, you have to put your oxygen mask on before the kiss. And I was like, that I understand not pouring from an empty cup, but at the same time, we have to be realistic in a way that we cannot ask the children to get it put on a back burner. We have to create some level of realistic functionings in a system that allows us to have parallel healing. Because although they say, oh yeah, we have to stop the cycle within ourselves, even having the way that our relationship healing, our relationship with ourselves is going to dictate all of our other future relationships, romantic or not. We are not the ones that realistically stop that cycle that we've already given to the children. We've already contaminated them in a way that we can only dilute it from this point. And we are now asking the children to stop the cycle. So we need to really put greater awareness on different things that can be implemented within the shelter resources to make sure that they're not getting left behind, because realistically, there's no destination to recovery. It becomes a lifestyle, and we can't ask them to continue to wait for a healing that may never come in the way that a lot of people feel like it will. So it's like realistically just creating that parallel services and tools for both adults and children, I feel like was very critical, and one thing that I feel like was underserved.
Thank you. Hope for DEEDRA. You guys are being very polite.
Lots of thinking. Honestly, I'm just really thinking back to the actual process to get into shelter, right? Mm-hmm. The calls to the hotline, like the repetitiveness of continuously having to repeat your story. And you begin to feel like, is it in your head? Are you imagining this, right? Like you have to keep reliving it. And it's, I think that is one thing that we can shift a lot. Also just our pets, like access to safety for them, right? And it's not like euthanizing them, and it's like, it's not that, it's keeping them with us and ensuring that they're with us every step of the way, because realistically, you wouldn't tell us we could come in and leave our kids, right? So it's a package deal and understanding that, and just not being shunned. Like I know, some constituents I've worked with have taken their pets to, PATH. Sorry guys, HRA, but I do this right now. And have called me in tears because they will not allow their pets in. And these are women fleeing with their children, men fleeing as dads with their children and their pets and seeking refuge. And I think it's disgusting to put that barrier up, right? And so to answer your question a little more directly, Danielle, stopping the barrier between direct services and safety for ourselves and our pets. Like families should be welcomed in with open arms. And like, let's talk about logistics after, but if you're coming to us for safety, we're gonna take you in. There should be no barrier or nothing. Right to shelter is a big thing. And in the city of New York, we talk about that a lot, but what does that really mean when people have the right to shelter and are trying to get off the streets with their pets, right? Or out of broken situations with their pets and their children. And we're coming for these services that we're entitled to, and we're being met with 5,000 questions, and sometimes, and a lot of time, no. So, yeah.
Thank you, DEEDRA.
I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say, actually, when you talked about PATH, because when I went to PATH, I had initially focused on boarding Coco because I knew it would be the hardest for her while we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. So through the Mayor's Alliance, I was able to do that, to board Coco. So we had like 30 days or something like that. And then when I went to PATH, the Mayor's Alliance had told me about URI. So I was telling them about URI, I was going to get you placed and all these things. And so I had told them about URI, and they said, it doesn't work like that. And they just wouldn't even hear me or consider Coco or anything. They ended up placing us in a shelter that didn't accept pets. And we're in New York where URI is here, you know, it's here. It's not everywhere, but it's here. And they still put us in a, you know, shelter where we had a suite mate and, you know, she had a child and I had the kids, and Coco was not going to be able to come there. I don't know who, but yeah, Jenny helped me at the Mayor's Alliance. I don't know if that's who the person in the comments is talking about, but that is who helped me at the Mayor's Alliance. But yeah, so we so eventually we were reunited because the Mayor's Alliance. Hey Jenny, Kobe, hi! Oh my gosh, that's crazy. But yes, I remember. Yeah, she helped me, but she's the one who made sure that we got a place at URI. If it wasn't for that, going through the regular sheltering system, we just wouldn't have, because they told me it doesn't work. Like, definitely need some help.
Yeah, I was
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Selena.
No, I was just gonna, both Hope and DEEDRA made me think of something as well, as far as with pets. If I feel like if services have not yet make an effort to get vetted with military one source. Typically that's kind of like the 211 of military. And since a lot of individuals are typically displaced and away from their support system due to military service being bounced around, I know that I was not aware that I was able to even have potentially, I would have went anywhere in the country if I knew that I was able to escape with my dog along with my children. It delayed, honestly, I was able to intermittently get 5 dogs out of the house. But my one dog that I unfortunately lost to DV is like all of the potential escapes could have looked different had those resources been housed as a resource. Even the advocates did not have that listed as an option for myself. And a lot of times, like I was saying, they are directed to Military One, or they'll direct individuals to Military One. And they kind of leave it up to organizations to reach out to them and get vetted to make sure they're legit, like business or whatever, so they can start directing people to these services if they call in saying that they need them. So that would be wonderful if everyone can make that effort to go and get vetted through Military One source.
I'll post the link to Military One source in the chat so folks can see that. I think we have time for one more very quick question, and someone from the audience actually has a pretty beautiful ending question. So thank you, Laura. So if you could say something to yourself when you were just coming into safe shelter, what would you say to that person?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bit, take a minute. I know it's...
I think, well, one of the things that I always try to pass along to just give someone that space of just knowing that, like, the next couple moments are like I always say, you don't have to be, you only have to be as strong as your next step, because I feel sometimes the journey feels overwhelming, and just being able to just think about that one step instead of all of the miles that you feel like you have ahead. Sometimes that's the only thing that you need to keep you going. And that also allows you to just be your best self step by step. And in turn, you'll have a beautiful journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, unfortunately.
I would just say the best is yet to come.
Yes.
You done good, girl. You're safe.
Yes. Yes.
Best is yet to come. That's what I would tell myself. And I'm proud of you too, Selena. I know.
Likewise, you guys are amazing.
Yeah.
Such an honor to be here with you.
Absolutely.
I would definitely say to myself, you got this, and one foot in front of the other, you